Welcome back to Track Talk. I figured it's been a while since we've done 1880, so we will comment this game. We'll try and keep the pace fairly fast, assuming some familiarity with the game now that we've done a couple videos, and just try and keep the video length pretty short. With all that said, we'll jump right into the auction. Mercedes will be leading us off. Ian bids 25 for the Wusong, hoping for potential infusion of cash and an opportune moment. Ed, he goes up to 30, and we'll see if the other players want to contest this at all. Looks like Mercedes is passing, and Ed will take it for 30. Kai Ping, kind of a little bit of a boring private, no special power, just a little bit of revenue. Ed is going up to 10 for it, so focusing on these cheap privates. Pierre going up to 15. Louis passing. Mercedes passing. Ed passing, so Pierre is going to take it. Now on to a company with an actual private action, and Pierre will be leading us off. He goes up to 45 for it. Louis 50, pretty expensive already. Looks like Mercedes and Ed are passing Pierre. He passes, so Louis will end up with it. Now he will be going for the Taiwan line. Goes up to 60. Mercedes going to overbid him. Ed, so first private, I think, with three bids, or three players bidding on it. Pierre is the only player to pass. Louis passing, Mercedes passing, and Ed will be stuck with it for 70. Now we're into the rivers, and Mercedes going all the way up to 90 for it. Ed overbidding, Pierre passing, Louis passing, and Ed takes it. So far a pretty boring auction. Not a whole lot of contested privates. Mostly two players have been putting in a bid, and then one of the players, the first player that's bid, has been passing, leaving the second player to bid with the honor of owning the private. I imagine we'll see that change here. We have three of the more important privates now, so may actually see a little bit of a contest here. So far, Ed has been winning a lot of these privates, and as a result has not a whole lot of cash going into the more expensive privates. He will be starting us on the certificate, though, and going up to 100 for it. Pierre, 105. Louis passing. Mercedes going up to 115, and she may just take it for that. Looks like she does. Pierre going for 200 on the BCR presidency. Of course, with a $100 par, that's the value of the shares you'll get, so reasonable to just jump right to that. Louis overbids the 205, 210. Ed's passing, Pierre passing, so actually not interested in being the president there. And we'll see if Louis bids over Mercedes at all. He does. So Louis will take it for 215. $15 premium for the honor of running the BCR, usually a pretty good company. And as expected, he pars it at 100. I imagine we'll be seeing him take the ABC permit. And I think that we should be able to check that here. Yep, so ABC. Be kind of suicidal to take the BCD. And finally, the Rocket of China is up. Louis will be starting us off, bid 65. This train is worth 100, so even bidding up to 100 is very reasonable. Mercedes, 70. Pierre is not interested, sitting on a lot of cash. Louis is also passing. This might be a pretty cheap rocket. Mercedes bidding 80, and we'll win it for 80. Okay. So Louis will have first choice of investors, and as the BCR president, probably going to be seeing him look towards the south. So either French, Portuguese, or British investors. Would be surprised to see him take one of the two central, or, wouldn't really make a whole lot of sense or a lot of synergy to take Russia, but maybe we'll be surprised. So he does take Portuguese. Portuguese will take a little bit of time to link up with the BCR, but very feasible to do that in green. Mercedes now, she has Rocket and the engineers, so the permit. Pretty open start, not a whole lot of cash, but I guess compared to Ed, pretty much the same. And we'll see where she wants to go. She chooses the French, okay? So a lot of activity down south. Ed, he takes the British, more south, and Pierre, last company, will choose Russia. So pretty common. I think that you tend to see the southern privates or southern investors in Russia start. I think I almost always see Russia start, and not too often will you see the middle of the map investors. Louis, BCR, could just buy more of his shares, only two of them available, may want to just lock them down, prevent other people from riding on his coattails. He does. Mercedes, She's parring a new company at 90. Um, did have the money to float it at 100, I believe, but maybe wants a 30% presidency. We'll have to see. So she does. That's why we didn't see a $100 par there. And starting the CKR. CKR and the French investor, very close to one another. So this may be a very early link up and closure of that French investor. She takes it with the AB permit, and Ed is now up. He is buying the only share of the CKR, and Pierre is buying the BCR. So BCR is sold out, CKR is sold out. The other two players didn't have any actions available to them because there were no shares available. So actually, even though Louis has money, he wasn't able to invest it. We'll see if that alters the eventual priority. Ed does have cash to float a company if he wants, and he'll take the NJR, so east side of the map, and parring at 90, which is the most he was available to do for a 20% presidency, leaving himself just a few extra bucks into the next stock round. Pierre now went back for that BCR share to prevent the other players from buying it, and now has his option of companies. He is the Russia investor, and looks like he's going to be operating up north in the QSR for now. QSR, a good distance from the Russian investor, so going to take probably until green to link up, but not all that far. He takes a 20% presidency and a $100 par. Louis now has options in terms of buying shares, and he buys the QSR. He's a believer in Pierre's company. And we're back to Pierre. Everybody else is out of cash. Pierre could buy paying shares. I guess it's not fair to say paying shares, but could buy shares of Arlie floated companies, or he could go back and take a 20% presidency for a lower par, which looks like he's doing. So he'll take the BZU, and the BZU is another northern company. So he's going to have a monopoly up here in the north with his Russian investor. May see some lucrative Trans-Siberian runs relatively early because he's going to have a lot of track points between the BZU and the QSR to set up track. So he's now out of cash, and we are into the first operating round, starting with the investors. Interesting that we didn't see any Beijing companies. Not uncommon to see the JHU or the JHA start in the first stock round, but not in this game. So we'll see when the players are interested in getting down into Beijing. Pierre, again, in Russia, he's laying, I think this is pronounced Uyghur. I've been criticized for my pronunciation in this title in the past, but I'm assuming that's Uyghur. Regardless, laying east and runs a train. We are now on to the British investors operating down south, and really only one option, I suppose, could have laid a curved city, but we'll be laying out of the offboard, of course. We're on to Portugal. Portugal out of Macau, also linking up with the offboard. And then the French are last. And it looks like they are heading right towards the CKR. So we said that this was potentially a very early link up. Could see this happen in the next cycle of the operating phase. Onto the first player-owned company, BCR, does have the 2 track points and is taking the 00. So depending on how that upgrades in green, could see a quick link up for the CKR into Chengdu. But I think more realistically, we're going to be seeing some tragic track laid there. I don't know that these two players are really excited to cooperate. BCR, see how many 2 trains they want. Looks like they're going to content with 3. That is a fair number of 2 trains, but the BCR with all the track points available to it and a quick token down in, what is this, Chongqing, can run all 3 of those trains. So going to be running pretty hot. And yeah, I think he owns 30% of that company. He does. QSR, First Northern Company, laying the 00 and oriented in order to cooperate with the BZU and his Russian investors. So I think we will be seeing some rather early link ups for a lot of these players in this game. We'll see how many 2 trains he wants to buy. BCR, of course, bought 3 of them, so we are running through them pretty quickly. He's going to be sitting at just 1 for now. The CKR, he lays into the French investor, so we do see that link up in the next go around. And he has the rocket for the 2 train, so he's not going to be falling back. And does he buy another 2 train? He does. So we'll be running 2 trains and should have 2 routes as soon as he lays that track to the east. NJR, he is heading to kind of no man's land. Doesn't look like he's going to be taking advantage of this ferry. Um, this player is Ed. Did he not have the ferry private? He does not. It looks like Louis has that. Okay. So I'll be curious to see where the NJR is headed. He is the British investor, so maybe just looking to weasel his way down south here over the next few operating rounds, but that's going to be kind of slow progress. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how you're supposed to play the NJR. I don't see this company start in the first operating round very often. The HKR is kind of the more typical start, and then you make a beeline up to Beijing. Buying a 2 train, and we are into the last company, BZU. Looks like he's setting up for an early link up with the Russian investor, buying actually buying 2 twos, and there's 1 2 train left. So he had the option there of triggering a stock round. If we look at this, it would have really only benefited probably Ed, who has the money for a share. Nobody else does. So makes sense not to do that. Would kind of accelerate the game potentially. Russian investor links up with the BZU, and the BZU is Pierre's company, but it is not the first company he floated. So I don't know if that was intentional or not, but he's not going to be linking up in this first operating round because of the order in which he floated his companies. He is running for the 40, and we are on to the British investor. British investor is just slowly working his way up to the NJR. No surprises there. Portuguese investor, I believe, no, it's going to be the French investor that's going to close. So the Portuguese investor is going to lay the double dit and just start laying track over to his presidency in the BCR. It's going to take him a couple of operating rounds to get over there, but with the BCR's double track lays, it actually won't be that long. And finally, we have the French investor, which is going to be going away. So he lays to the east out of Nanning. Didn't have any options to upgrade the CKR's home or upgrade the DIT because we're not in green yet. And we'll see how he wants to play this merge. So he gets the share of the CKR, and it looks like he's taken the cash into actually, so he's taking the cash into his presidency, so not into his personal coffers. He does take the token on the offboard. I'm not a huge fan of that. You only have so many tokens, and you're kind of throwing one of them away where it can't block anyone. BCR now. He is laying his double track into Chongqing and should be able to token there and run all of his companies. So running for 130, decent revenue for so early in the game. Of course, the revenues I expect will be getting astronomically higher than that in not too long. QSR, giving himself a run, running his single train, and pays that out. Doesn't look like he's buying any trains. Speaking of trains, we are going to be going into a stock round in the BZU unless someone buys a train earlier. CKR, he is actually able to lay towards the east out of his offboard as a result of this token. So that's a interesting development that I hadn't really foreseen. I was expecting him to operate out of Kunming. But I suppose he's saving himself some terrain costs? Not really. He still has to pay terrain. So not sure about that. Regardless, he is tokening and then running for 100, which he pays. And he does buy the train. So he's going to trigger the stock racket a little bit early. And that is bad news for the 2 companies that weren't able to run because their presidencies, the NJR and the BZU, won't have any cash from their revenue. So as a result of that, Mercedes is leading us. They had the revenue along with the BCR presidency. And Ed and Pierre are missing out on some of their shares. Louis buys the BZU. BZU is going to be operating in this operating round for sure. So pretty safe investment. Mercedes he's actually parring a new company, the SCR. So this is a company that he was laying track for with this Eastern tile lay that we were trying to make sense of. So imagine we're going to be seeing this company immediately drop this 00 tile and then take advantage of the track that's been laid for it by its other company. And he's parring that at 80. So it will be operating very soon as well. Okay. Takes the 20% presidency. And which permit did they pick? The BCD. Okay, so needs green to break pretty early in order to actually be able to lay track for his own company. Ed is buying the BZU, Pierre out of cash. So selling the BCR, and we'll be going back for his own BZU, it looks like. The company has 5 shares bought, so we'll be seeing it get capitalized at the earliest opportunity. Louis passing, Mercedes passing. Looks like everybody passes. So Louis has priority, and we're going to be going into the NJR operation here. Interestingly, CKR triggered the phase change and then, or sorry, triggered the stock round and is now buying the first 2+2 train. NJR looks like they are potentially heading down to Taiwan. Does the NJR have that Taiwan private? It looks like it. So going to get extra $20 there. Taiwan is just such an underwhelming revenue center. This does leave them open and green to linking up with the investor, but boy, Taiwan is just not the place you want to be. Runs a 2 train for 40, pays it out, and is also going to buy a 2+2 train. BZU now looks like they're laying in Changchun and should have 2 runs for 2 trains without a token. So he's going to pass the token, runs for 80, and pays it out. Also buying a 2+2. With the DITs that he's going to be running, it makes sense to pick up that plus train. But he will have to drop a token somewhere if he wants to run both of his trains for full efficiency. So may see this train get shuffled. And actually, he has 3 trains, so not going to be able to run all 3 trains as it stands. May see the train shuffle or even hope to get into green before his next operation. SCR, new operation, not able to lay track as we're not in the B phase yet, so a little bit inefficiency there. I'm sure that Mercedes was hoping that someone would open up green beforehand, but I don't know if that was a reasonable expectation. So not able to lay his home tile, but of course the CKR is going to lay it for it before it had the opportunity to run this train anyways, so actually not that inefficient. Russian investors up and laying a second track out of Russia, maybe hoping to bypass these less lucrative cities in the hopes of setting up a Trans-Siberian run a little bit earlier in the game with a shorter train. It does cost him money in the investor to do it. So running for 60, British investor, not quite able to link up yet, and is heading to Taiwan instead of setting up the NJR for the link up. Running his 2+2 for 90, pretty good revenue. Portuguese investor, not yet linked up with the BCR, but probably will in the next operating round, it looks like. BCR does complete the connection with the Portuguese investor and is running 3 trains for 130. QSR looking to get into Harbin and potentially token for the BZU there, locking down this Trans-Siberian run for both of these companies. Running just a single 2 train, may want to pick up a second train here, has the cash, and should be expecting green to occur. However, if he buys that 2+2, he's going to be triggering the stock round. Is that in his interest? It may well be. The only company to have run here is BCR, so Mercedes potentially losing out on a run here, but of course Pierre also on the BZU. I don't remember exactly where the last stock round was triggered. I believe the BZU has run since the last stock round, so he would get some revenue there. Just looking at the cash, he actually has the most cash and hasn't paid out yet, so may want to trigger the stock round here just so he can get a share lead. He does. Wanted that train anyways, and it's just a nice bonus that he's able to buy a share compared to everybody else. So nobody's taking advantage of the Wusong, and Louis just doing a few slight adjustments to his portfolio here, selling the QSR, and we'll buy the BCR. Mercedes passing, Ed going to buy the SCR. So actually more players able to take advantage of this stock round than I was anticipating. Pierre, he buys his own QSR, and looks like everybody else is going to be passing. Okay, so we are on to the Seeker. Actually, looks like the QSR was not quite done yet. Buys the 3. So we are into green now, and all the companies that have been fully capitalized receive the second half of their capital. And now we're onto the Seeker. So 4 trains in this company, now access to green track, and he does lay the SCR's home tile. Actually lays a second tile as well, able to take advantage of that now that we're in green. And running 4 trains for $300, pretty good. NJR is heading towards the British investor still, but actually cut himself off, and unfortunately is not able to lay a track and upgrade, so we're not going to be seeing the British link up just yet. But Britain will have a opportunity to lay one more track and link up when it operates, so not actually missing out on anything, but only able to run 1 train still, which is a little bit unfortunate. Running for 60, BZU, 3 trains. Does he upgrade Harbin? He does, and should be able to run all of his trains now pretty efficiently. And of course is opening up a token spot for his second company, the QSR. So running for 170, paying it, and buys a 3. Just looking at the train roster here, we have a number of 3s left, so a little bit of time before these 2 trains are rusting. SCR, last company, is upgrading Nanning and may just jump on that token. I don't know that they're under any real pressure from another company to token there just yet, but it would probably help their runs to get a little bit more central location, and probably wants that token in the end of the game, so they just secure it now. Looks like they do. Running for 100 and has just enough actually to buy the 3. Do they buy the 3? They are actually going to shuffle the train out of the checker, and as a result will be buying better trains into the CKR. He owns 40% of the CKR as opposed to the 20% of the SCR, so it makes sense to try and shuffle some cash over there and get some better runs. That train that was bought over had already run, so he didn't miss out on that. Russia investor is now linked up with the QSR, so last operation of this private investor, he's linking up with Harbin, again bypassing those lower value tiles, and we'll see how he wants to do this. Looks like he is putting all the cash into the company, and will he take the token? He does not. Okay. So I think that's the way I would have played that as well. I don't know. I don't really value these off-board tokens. I'd rather keep them available for later in the game on the map. Britain probably will be upgrading into NJR. Does. So this private will also be closing, and looks like he's taking the cash into the company and doesn't take the token either. And the final company is Portugal. Portugal will be upgrading Macau, it looks like, and he takes the cash into the company, and he actually takes the token in the private or foreign investor, but this is not an off-board token, so much higher yield. And Macau is actually a pretty nice token to have. Going to potentially open him up into Shanghai. Actually, basically guarantees him access into Shanghai, which is a pretty nice revenue center. So reasonable to take that token. The only one I question is this CKR token. BCR going to be laying track here, upgrading his home, and running for 170 with 3 2 trains. He needs to pick up a non-2 train at some point. Otherwise, he's going to be in danger of falling back. Imagine we'll see a 3 train bought here. He does. So going to be running 4 trains probably next operation, unless we see a stock round and a bunch of companies float to push into the 4s. There are 7 trains before that happen. And looking at the stock round, 2 3 trains left. Could see that in purchase to trigger the stock round. But I do still imagine we'll see the BCR get one more run of its 2 trains. QSR, upgrading Jilin, and probably should drop a token in Harbin for better runs, which he does, running all 3 of his trains for 220, which he pays out. The CKR now, he only has 3 trains as a result of sharing one with the SCR, and it's going to be upgrading the SCR's home, and then running his 3 trains for 290, really nice revenue there. And he's actually not going to buy a train, so he's not pushing into the stock round. We still have 2 of those left. NJR looks like he is laying track down south, getting access into a second offboard, and also into Macau. May see that token come out. I don't think there's any competition just yet for that token, but may want to just secure it so he doesn't get locked out of there. So it does drop the token, and it runs for 190. Does he want a 3 train? Looks like he does. So one of those are left. He could, in theory, buy it and just trigger the stock round here, but it's going to pass. BZU train locked, not going to be seeing him buy any trains, but he is heading towards Vladivostok and actually completes the link up. So currently they would need a 4+4 train to create that. A 3+3 is not going to be adequate. They would have to bypass one of these cities somehow in order to do that. So 4+4 train going to be seeing the Trans-Siberian Railway set up, but not quite yet. He is tokening in Jilin. That's interesting. I wonder about that. Does oftentimes get you access into Beijing, but is he going to have to drop a second token there with the QSR? He might. QSR does have a token left. Yeah, so we'll see how that develops. One of these Beijing companies could try and race up there with 2 track lays and steal that token, which would be bad news for the QSR. So he runs for 290. SCR, last company, is operating down south here, upgrading a ditch for a little extra money. Runs for 180 and actually withholding. Unusual to see withholds early in the game here. It's traditionally where communism is coming into play. This does happen to give him enough money to trigger a stock round though, so maybe he'll buy the 3 train here. He does not. Just going to be sitting on the cash. Okay, we'll see how that develops. Keep an eye on the SCR, see what he's doing there. The BCR looks like he's upgrading Chongqing for a few extra bucks, running 4 trains, and has a revenue of 310, which he pays out. QSR, is he going to secure this token in Jilin? Upgrading Changchun, and not going to be dropping any tokens just yet. So he pays that, and could in theory buy that last 3. Let's see where we are in operating order. It's coming up. I don't know that he's necessarily motivated to trigger a stock round here. He would have the most cash. Actually, Louis has the most cash. Yeah, I mean, he'd be a share ahead of Mercedes and Ed. 3 trains aren't terrible. We'll see what he wants to do. He's going to pass and just let it export, it looks like. CKR, operating down south, upgrading more green cities, and still just has the 3 trains running for 290, and it looks like he paid that out. And he will trigger the stock round by buying that 3. So Ed is taking his cash. He was going to be trailing everybody else for shares in this operating round, so felt obligated to take that extra $70. Not unreasonable, and we're into Louis' actions in the stock round. Looks like he is going to be the first company or first player into Beijing, and he's taking the $90 par. And fortunately for him, he's still going to be able to operate fairly early. You always got to look at where the train is. If you, for instance, picked a $100 par here, there's a chance that a company would not operate before the next stock round. So he's playing it safe, although it does cost him $100 of company capital. He takes a 30% presidency, and he is taking the BC permit. Mercedes, going to be buying paying shares of the CKR, it looks like. Ed, also going to be parring a new company, also taking 90 par for the same reason, and he takes the HKR, so there's some nice synergy there with the Ninja being right next to each other. Again, a little bit surprised that we didn't see the HKR start first. I think that's the more typical behavior. Shanghai is a little bit of a better revenue center. These S tiles, where are they? Here, so an extra $10, and that continues kind of throughout the game. But he has been given the opportunity to take that company now, so making up for lost time. He takes a 30% presidency, and it looks like also a BC permit. Pierre, buying the BZU. Louis, he floated his Beijing company, so pretty low on cash now, and he will buy another JHA, not entirely capitalized in terms of 5 shares being bought just yet. Mercedes, she bought a paying share last time, so could still float a company if she wanted, and we'll just go back for that CKR, which is our own company, really doubling down. Ed, buying the NJR. Pierre, buying his own QSR, actually BZU, sorry. Louis out of cash, Mercedes, sticking to her guns in the CKR. Ed out of cash and actually selling a BZU in order to buy the NJR. So now he's going to get some extra capital for his own company there and hurts Pierre's share value. Pierre, he's going to buy the BZU now that it's been decreased in price. Louis out of cash, and it looks like everybody but Pierre is passing. Pierre will buy his last share in the NJR, and this will leave Louis with priority. So we're into the operating round again, and on the NJR, NJR is heading towards Shanghai, laying the track for his second company, and may need to immediately token in Nanjing with the HKR, or could lose access to the south. Unfortunately, he's already blocked at Macau, so would have to head south through Nanjing by a different route if he wants to make his way over to the west ever. Alternatively, could just upgrade Shanghai and hope to head up towards Beijing more quickly. We'll see what he decides. NJR running for 320, which he pays, and does have cash if he wants for this 3+3. Looks like they do purchase that and is going to force some discards. He is discarding one of his own trains, and the BCR and the CKR already ran their trains, so mostly hurting the BZU, I would say, because I don't think they got to run that train before they had to discard. JHA does head right up to Jlin and drops a token there. Bad news for the QSR. I think that was pretty predictable. We had talked about that earlier. There is potentially life still for the QSR. They have that token in Harbin and access through Changchun into Beijing. So not the end of the world, but pretty good news for the JHA. Has all this pre-laid track pretty much available to it. May see this company also taking care of advantage of the Trans-Siberian route later on in the game. Probably just going to have to wait till Brown to do it, but definitely possible. So we are seeing another 3+3 train. We had said in the past that we're going to need to see a 4+4 train in order to get this Trans-Siberian route running, so not quite there. Buying a train across from the BCR for just $1. I guess this opens up train space for the BCR to buy a better train. He does have cash, but he needs to be careful that he doesn't fall back here. Those 3+3 trains could, in theory, go. I think we still have a newly floated company. And does the BZU have? BZU's train locked, and the SCR doesn't have the cash. So I suppose it's safe, but a little bit risky to leave the BCR just sitting on 2-2 trains. HKR is upgrading Shanghai and buys the 3+3. BZU upgrading Beijing, now has a route down there and is going to be running for 310. Not buying any trains. The SCR down south here is upgrading Kunming, the CKR's home, and running 2 trains for 180, which they withhold again. Has the SCR paid out a single time? It has paid out one time, but it's looks like it's withholding pretty heavily here. A little bit unusual to see that in 1880. We are back to the BCR, and BCR looks like they got what they wanted and are able to run their 2-2 trains. Should be picking up, I think, the last 3+3 here. Actually, there's one left after he buys, so not going to be triggering a stock round unless he buys both of them, which I don't think he can do. So running his 2-2 trains, runs for 180, and we'll pay that out. Buying the 3, and actually buying it across from his other presidency. So the JHA has a 3+3. It's not going to be falling back trainless. This is interesting. The BCR is his lead company, and he's depleted of cash. Is he trying to disincentivize other people from investing in this company? I'm not entirely sure. We'll have to follow that situation as well. QSR gets the run into Beijing and is going to pay that out for 300. CKR, we're back to the rocket company, and looks like they're going to be laying a bypass of Kunming into the 00, and their revenue is going to be 310, which they pay. We've got to be getting pretty close to this train marker. Actually, he buys the 3+3, so that may be extending things. If we go back for a second, let's see where this train marker was. It was coming up on the HKR, so he may well have extended the operating round here by buying that train, unless somebody else feels like buying the last one. NJR won't be that company because they're train locked. So they are getting into Taiwan, and I think he has that Taiwan private, so we'll have a $50 revenue by tapping that, it looks like. And he's actually going to hit it twice, so running for 430, which is pretty darn good. JHA, 3+3 train, upgrading the DIT outside of Beijing, and running the 3+3. Does have an opportunity to trigger a stock round here, but we'll be foregoing that. HKR, upgrading Nanjing, probably needs to secure that token, does, and runs for 180, which pays it out. BZU, upgrading the QSR's home. QSR has the ability to bypass Jilin City through that DIT now and also get access or double access into Beijing. So that token in Jilin City has been pretty neutralized. Running 3 trains and paying for 320. The SCR down south is going to be just laying track into Chongqing, it looks like. I don't know that he wants the token there with either of his companies. Maybe happy to leave that open since there's really no competition just yet. But in fact, we'll token it and is running for 240, it looks like, which he pays. So nobody is eager to trigger a stock round, and we may just see the train export on the CKR operation. BCR certainly won't be doing it with $1. Running 3 trains for 280 and pays it out. QSR, upgrading Uyghur, and paying for 310, it looks like. CKR, so I think that we're going to be seeing the next stock round here since nobody has triggered it, and I believe they bought the last 3+3. He is going to be running 3 trains and has a pretty monstrous revenue of 460. Boy, I bet the NJR was wishing that they'd been able to get another 430 run before this stock round, but not quite. So we are staring down the 4 trains. The CKR is not going to be able to trigger that, and I don't think the NJR is either. They both look like they're train locked. So we'll see who's able to buy that first 4 train. In terms of new companies floating, it's going to be a while before a new company is able to operate. The highest par is 80, and they have 5 companies operating between them. So it looks like these 2 trains are going to be safe for a while. JHA may be the company to do it. Louis is first up. He has the least cash by a pretty fair margin. And something we haven't been looking at is the relative standing of the players. Looks like Pierre is off to an early lead, has 2 shares ahead of the next closest player in terms of net worth, Mercedes. His BZU and QSR have been operating pretty well and have that late game Trans-Siberian run to look forward to. His closest competitor currently is Mercedes on the Rocket in the CKR and the SCR. So both players in first have developed really nice, tight little networks for their two companies and have just been, very efficient in terms of their synergy. Ed is in third, and he has the NJR and the Hacker. We've kind of criticized the decision to start the NJR instead of the Hacker early, and that may be part of the reason why he's struggling here. And then Louis on the BCR is actually in last place. Not something that you see all that often. The BCR is oftentimes an early leader. This may be a little bit of a misleading analysis, of course, because the stock rounds happen irregularly in 1880, so you can't just look at the net worth. Some of these companies haven't had an opportunity to operate the same number of times, but as a very gross metric of the game state, it looks like Louis is beginning to trail here. BCR is being sold. Okay, so he doesn't have much faith in that company, and where is he going to put all his cash now? He's going to be parring the JHU. JHU is not going to be operating for a very long time. Actually, just missed the operation. So who knows what train this company is going to end up with? Probably a 4, but potentially a 4+4. And will have no control over the early track while the other companies are able to operate before him. So a little bit risky there. You do want those high pars, of course, to capitalize trains, but this is not the opportune time for that. He takes a 30% presidency and which is the permit, the CD permit. So actually not going to be laying any track yet either. Needs to wait for a phase change. Mercedes is buying the NJR. Ed is parring the JGG. So a lot more activity now in Beijing. The JGG, I believe, is one of the Western companies. Let's see. Yes, it is. So currently doesn't have any track. Of course, when Beijing kind of merges, that's not going to be relevant anymore. But at least until Brown may struggle for runs. We'll see. He takes a 40% presidency, and we'll see which permit, C permit. This is also a $100 par, so a long time before this company's going to be running as well. But in that particular case, maybe to his benefit to allow a later phase and potentially have Beijing open up for him. This is the player that's playing the NJR and NJR and Hacker. Not a whole lot of synergy between these companies down here and the JGG. So we'll see how this track develops to, allow him to lay a synergistic track for all of his companies. Pierre, last player to operate in this stock round so far, and he's going to be taking the JLR for 80. So he has done the opposite calculation of the other players and said, I'm going to take a lower par to make sure I operate early, and we'll see if he's able to make that work for him. He's taken a 30% presidency, and the JLR is going to end up with a CD permit. Looks like Louis has bought the first company in Beijing to operate, his JHA. Mercedes is buying the NJR. Ed buys the NJR as well. A lot of interest in this company. It does have good revenue, and I believe it's next to operate. Is that correct? It is. So very safe investment for all these players. Pierre, he's buying the NJR as well. It's sold out. Louis buying the JHA. Mercedes buying the BZU. Ed also interested in the JHA, out of cash now. Pierre buying the BZU. Is the BZU operating soon? Not super soon, but it is almost certainly going to be operating before the next stock round, so still a good investment. And Louis is buying the JHA, so everybody's focusing on this company for now. Does have a ton of cash, it's going to be able to push trains in theory. Mercedes buying the BZU. That company is now sold out. Ed out of cash. Pierre buying the QSR, getting the rest of his capital. Louis, JHU. JHU is one of the newly floated companies, so won't be paying anytime soon. Mercedes buying the JHA still. Ed passing Pierre, last share for him. Goes for the JHA, which is now sold out. Louis, last share, and it will be the JHU. Mercedes passing, just going to be taking priority, it looks like. And we are back to the NJR. NJR is train locked, so not going to be buying the 4. but I think we agreed that the JHA would be. So now it looks like Ed is prioritizing getting over to Beijing to set up the JGG for some good runs, and maybe hoping that he can secure that second token in Shanghai with the JGG. I'm not entirely sure how he's going to play that. Running for 440, really nice revenue, and looks like he pays that out. JHA, linking the JHU into the existing track up north. He now has two companies out of Beijing, so just helping his other company out. And I imagine we'll be seeing some trains bought here with $1,200 in the presidency. Looks like he's running the 3+3 for 150, pays it out, and we are into the fours. So communism has hit, and the rocket was able to operate pretty closely to right before when this occurred. So was actually able to sneak over into the 15 bonus share of the market. Really good news for that president. Everybody else is stuck at a maximum of 10. Interestingly, the CKR is the rocket, so of course a little bit ahead of the other companies and getting a great bonus. But this player's other company, the SCR, has been withholding very heavily and has no bonus at all. So I don't know if that really averages out. Probably still in net negative form. JHA, does he buy another 4? Is going to be content with just the 1. And the HKR is up. We'll see if he continues to head towards the JGG. Looks like he's slowly meandering his way over there. Running a 3+3 for 180, which he withholds actually. Going to be seeing a lot more withholding now that we're in communism. Unfortunately for him, he's $10 short of a 4 train, so probably we'll see yet more withholding from him. BZU, going to be upgrading Tianjin, and doesn't look like he's doing any tokening. Running for 260, and he also will withhold. Does he pick up a 4 train? He does. SCR with the 2+2 needs to make sure they end up with another train at the end of this operation, I think. And upgrading a DIT for a few extra dollars, withholds, and should be picking up a 4. But that is a lot of withholding. Mercedes only has 20% of this presidency, so not the end of the world for her, I guess, but still kind of painful. And it looks like this company has not been capitalized, so didn't get the other half of their cash yet. Maybe she's hoping to buy up some cheap shares in the future and get the rest of the capital and then run some really good trains in this company. JLAR, first newly floated company, and is not laying any track because we're not in the right permit yet, I don't believe. Buying a 4, and we are into the BCR operation. Needs to get another train in this company, I think. So laying track out of Guangzhou, running for 200. How is it so high with just the 3 train? I think that's because of his bonus from the stock market. And is going to full withhold. Doesn't have enough money for another train. So a lot of withholding going on. Not atypical in 1880 to see this, but just because your stock isn't running back doesn't mean that you don't want to pay out if you can, so that you can get some cash for shares. Speaking of shares, when we look at the operating order, there's a while before this next stop round, unless we're running out of trains. And actually, it looks like we are. So I think when we get to the JGG, we're going to be seeing the stock round, because the JGG is a new company. And actually, I think the JHU is as well. So maybe in the JHU, actually. QSR, just getting 2 runs into Beijing. And actually going to be heading to bypass Beijing down south. Need to be a little bit careful if you're Ed, that the QSR doesn't steal a token and cut your runs on the NJR and HKR. Running for 310 and withholding. A lot of money in this company. Does he trigger a stock round here? He does. Interesting. Okay. So that's an interesting decision. Not a whole lot of cash for this player to take advantage of compared to, for instance, Ed and Mercedes. Could easily see them get a share up on him as a result of this. Mercedes going to buy the CKR. Ed buying the CKR as well. Now that company's sold out. Pierre, only share for him will be the JLR. And the JLR is got a single 4 train, not the most lucrative. Louis, he buys the JHU. And Mercedes does have cash. He's going to pass and hope to hang on to priority, but I think that's a pipe dream here. Ed should be buying a share. Does, buys the QSR. And Pierre passing. Looks like Mercedes lost priority and is going to be sitting on cash as a result. Surprised we don't see them picking up cheap shares of this SCR. Has a decent train in the 4 train and good track. All right, we're on to the JHU. JHU is tokening in Tianjin, so it just doesn't want to lose out on our run. Beijing will open up, so it does have a run north already, but I guess a little bit paranoid. Buying the 4+4, so we will be starting to see these Trans-Siberian runs as soon as these companies up north get a 4+4 or any new train, basically. JGG, next new company to operate, will be upgrading Beijing and gets a run for himself. Does he want that token in Jinjin? He does. All right, so that's all tokened out. And buys the 4+4. CKR operating down south does have access to brown tokens, brown tiles, but I don't think he doesn't have a permit, so no track being laid for him. Just running for 440 and pays it out. We are heading towards the end of the communism, so anybody that wants to do some final withholds is going to be doing that now, but he feels confident. He doesn't need the cash. NJR upgrading Shanghai, and does he want that token? He does. So may see a withhold from him one more time here. Running for 410, and he actually pays it out. JHA, 2 trains. Unfortunately for him, only going to have 1 run into Beijing as it stands as a result of the tokens in Tianjin. And upgrading Jilin. Running for 330, which he pays. And not buying a train. HKR operating down south. Looks like they don't have a, oh no, they do have a permit, so they're operating down here. And running the 3+3 for 210, withholding. Does he buy a 4+4? Actually going to be shuffling company cash into the NJR, but not advancing the trains at all. So content to stay in communism, it looks like. BZU. With a 4 train, not going to be quite enough to get this Trans-Siberian run, so may need to withhold again here for a better train. Upgrading south of Beijing and running for 320, which he withholds. Can pick up a 4+4 if he wants, which he's going to defer for now. Looking at the market, the train marker is a ways away, so if nobody triggers this stock round by buying the train, it looks like we've got a lot more operations to get through. SCR, still only 20% owned of this company. Probably will be withholding again with the 4 train. And does. Buying a train out of the CKR for just $5. What is the significance of that? CKR, yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I guess was anticipating this train rusting before it can run. But maybe could have gotten a run on that train, actually. Because the train marker is currently on the CKR, and it doesn't look like anybody's motivated to push trains. So maybe losing a run on that train, unfortunately. I'm not sure why they transferred $5. JLR, upgrading Jinan, and actually tokening there. Okay. Withholding, and we're back to the BCR. Single 3 train here. He is upgrading Macau, running for 220, which he withholds. And he's going to shuffle money into the JHA as well. QSR, upgrading Harbin, still no Trans-Siberian route. Running a single train into Beijing for 370 and withholding. Also shuffling cash around. So I think we will be seeing the stock market or stock round on the operation of the CKR. Okay, good news for Mercedes. Going to get an extra run there. JHU has the train for the Trans-Siberian route, but doesn't have the tokens or the track. So no no dice for him. Running 240, pays it out. JGG, similar situation, laying towards the double dit, running for 240 and actually withholding, final withhold before communism breaks, it looks like. CKR, no track for him, but is going to be running for 510, pretty monstrous, and he pays that out. So we are into stock round 7, making good progress through this game, and Pierre is leading us off, but he has almost no cash. Had to withhold on both the BZU and the QSR quite heavily. Has a lot of cash in his companies, but is not going to be picking up too many shares in this stock round. And just taking a look at the game state, Mercedes is actually leading us right now. But again, this may be misleading because the CKR just had an opportunity to run, and a lot of the other companies haven't had a run to compensate that. So technically, Mercedes is ahead right now, but I think that it may be misleading. I'm really liking the BZU and QSR situation. They're going to have great runs for the end of the game with that bonus. They have a ton of cash for good late game trains, and he is actually leading in share density. The JLR is a little bit underwhelming. I'm not entirely sure where the track is for the JLR. Looks like he's got to run into Shanghai and then north into Russia, actually. So not half bad. So he's in a pretty good spot. Louis, JHA, JGU, and the BCR. That BCR has been a little bit of an underwhelming company, and he's also starting to trail in shares, so he may be in trouble. Mercedes, ton of cash, needs to buy a ton of shares and good shares here in order to make sure that they are able to maintain their lead. And then Ed, the NJR, HKR, and JGG, we've been pretty critical of that early start for him. And while he is technically in second right now, I don't know that we're going to be seeing him be able to improve his position. Pierre, he buys the JLR and is getting his company the rest of his capital. Louis buys the BCR, so reinvesting in his own company, a 3 and a 4 train in that company. 3 train's going to be rusting very soon. Mercedes, buying the cheap SCR, so has withheld it quite heavily and is going to be able to reap the rewards. Unfortunate for her that there's no yellow shares in this game. Well, that's not true. There are yellow shares. They're just not free for her certificates. So even these cheap shares are not going to allow her to buy all of them. Ed buying the HKR. Pierre is passing, interesting, is at the cert limit and is not interested in doing any shuffling of shares. So is happy with this portfolio for now. Louis, he is buying the BCR. Mercedes, buying the SCR, so has new cash to breathe some life into this company. But the revenue for this company is going to be permanently crippled compared to her competitors because they are all getting these plus 10, plus 15 bonuses, and she has to operate like 5 times in a row before she gets anything. So that's the downside of withholding like this in 1880. You just really can't catch up with the other players that way. Ed buying his HKR, getting the rest of the capital. Pierre still passing. Louis buys the BCR. Okay. Mercedes buying the HKR. So now that the SCR has been capitalized, no longer interested in that. Ed buying the BCR. Pierre still at cert limit. Louis buys the cheap SCR just for a share. Mercedes last share for them buys the HKR. Last share for Ed will be the HKR as well. HKR is not sold out, but 2 shares left. Looks like everybody will be passing here, which should leave Pierre with priority. Actually, Ed still is taking some actions and trashing the SCR 1 spot, buying the HKR, still not able to float up though. And it looks like Ed is just going to shuffle things around to make sure that the HKR is floating up. Pierre still has priority, and I'm just looking at the SCR here. That sale doesn't change anything. It's going to be a whole long time before they get to the ledge, so shouldn't be very relevant. If you're operating all the way dear at the bottom, a sale to put you in that last row could put you at the ledge very early, but I don't think that's going to become relevant. Regardless, back to the CKR operation, not going to be able to pick up a 6 train, and the NJR actually is in a position to pick up the 6 train. So may see some companies losing their threes before they're able to run. Anybody sitting on just a naked three here? No. The SCR is going to lose a run on the three, but it looks like everybody else, actually the HKR will as well. Everybody else is already operated. NJR operating down south, now has 2 runs out of Shanghai if he wants. Running for 320 and pays it, buys the first 6. JHA, as a result of train shuffling and trains rusting, does have a open slot for trains now and has a whole lot of cash to put towards that. Upgrading Changchun and not tokening just yet. 3+3 not going to be enough for the Trans-Siberian, but in the next operating round we'll have a train that's going to be long enough. Buying the 6, and actually buys 2 6s. HKR, laying that double DIT city, or double O city, running a 3+3 for 210, and can also pick up a 6 here, which he does. BZU, only a 4 train, should be picking up a 6 and probably triggering a stock round. So that was very fast. Running for 170, pays it out, and we are back into the stock round. So not very many operations there, and everyone is kind of at their cert limit. So we'll see. It should be a pretty quick stock round. Pierre passing, Louis buying the BCR, and now it's cert limit. Mercedes selling 2 shares of the HKR. Did the HKR just operate? It did. So this is what I like to see. Player realizing that there's a chance that the HKR won't operate before the next stock round. So sell the shares. Now we're not in communism. You hurt that player's net worth, and then buy shares that are going to be paying. I think that makes a lot of sense. You're double dipping. Buying the BCR. I don't know if the BCR is the way to do that. I think there's quite a ways before the BCR is going to be operating again. Actually, not true. We're pretty close to the end of the company order, so reasonable to buy that BCR. Ed passing, and Mercedes, 1 more share from her. She buys the QSR, and is now back at her cert limit. Downside of this, of course, is that you lose priority, but she was operating pretty late in priority already, so not really a huge sacrifice. Looks like Ed is seeing the wisdom of this. Could have done this a little bit earlier, but will sell that in his own HKR and buy the JGG. JGG now has enough cash for better trains, and I imagine we'll be seeing Ed. Actually, Mercedes not quite done either, so selling the JHA now and buying the QSR. Where's the QSR operating? QSR right after the BCR, so also highly liked operator rate, and has a ton of cash, so we'll have some good trains in the future. Ed buying the QSR, and looks like Pierre now is cottoning onto this strategy of selling shares that are unlikely to operate and picking up shares that are more likely. So all the players could have had done this earlier, but Mercedes was first in line. So as a result, may actually see her priority improve rather than going last. Buying the QSR, Louis passing, Mercedes passing, and Pierre still with actions to take, selling the JLR, and the QSR now will be floating up. Well played to Mercedes. I think that was pretty slick. Was able to get a jump on the other players, move up in priority, and also optimize her portfolio a little bit. Well done. BZU is done, and the SCR now. Not a whole lot of cash in this company despite all the withholds. Going to be upgrading a brown tile, running for just 170. Has to withhold yet again. We'll be able to pick up a 6E, which is going to be pretty nice, but boy, the withholds in this company have got to be hurting Mercedes. JLR, last company to operate, upgrading Jinan, and running for 180, which it withholds. Buying a 6E, and the BCR is back up. This company doesn't have a lot of cash, and that 4 train is not long for this world. These 6E trains are going to be going pretty quickly, I think. So needs to find a way to get a permanent train for his company. Runs a 4 for 160, pays it out, And the QSR, this is the company that everybody was so eager to buy. And I think that we're going to see the reason here in that it's going to upgrade for a Trans-Siberian run pretty easily and then buy a nice train to take advantage of it. Home City's upgraded now and does pick up the 6E. And he actually has secured a token into Beijing. So maybe he's not prioritizing a run in the Trans-Siberian with this company and is going to take advantage of his big diesel train or electric train to bypass some of these DITs in lower value cities and just run through Beijing and to locations south. JHU upgrading Tianjin and running the 4+4 for 250, which he has to withhold, and looks like he'll be picking up the second to last 6E train. So maybe seeing a stock round happening pretty early here. JGG going for the double DIT and runs a 4+4, buys the last 6E. So that was a very quick operation. We are back into the stock round. I will comment that I was talking about the 4+4 train being the start of the Trans-Siberian run, but it actually has not come to pass just yet. So it will actually end up being a pretty late Trans-Siberian run. We're already in stock round 9. Not much life left in this game. Speaking of life left in the game, Louis is leading us off. They are pretty farly in last place. Going to be hard for them to come back into this game at this point, I think. JHA, not a whole lot of cash, maybe just living with a 6 train. JHU has the 4+4, which is going to be running for a while, so decent revenues in this company potentially, but not a whole lot of cash for anything bigger than the 6E it currently has. The BCR running the 4 and a 6 needs to hope that these trains get a couple of runs. Otherwise, it's going to be stuck with just a 6 train. I think he is going to end up in last place or second to last place at the end of the game. Mercedes still technically in the lead, but very closely trailed by Ed. All these players are at their cert limit, but Mercedes is actually the least number of shares as a result of fewer presidencies and potentially lower density presidency shares as well. Has really gone hard on the CKR. CKR has no cash and just a 4+4, so that might be a little bit underwhelming. Fortunately for her, has advanced very far to the right on the stock market, so we'll have some extra revenue from that. Second company is the SCR. SCR has 2 trains, and one of them being an express train, so potential revenue there. But I think that unfortunately for her, she has peaked a little bit too early and may be overpassed by these other players who are trailing her pretty closely. Ed, NJR, Hacker, and JGG. NJR and the HKR have very similar track and actually both have 6 trains, so probably are set for the rest of the game. Don't imagine there's going to be a whole lot of evolution from either of those companies. And then his final company, the JGG, is operating out of Beijing with the express train. I don't know that they have great track around the JGG, though. Let's look at that. Yeah, it's going to have to bypass Jinan at this 00 to head to points south, and then up north is tokened out at Jilin. So no access into Vladivostok. Does have access into Russia, but that's only a $50 revenue center, so not that exciting. The JGG's track is a little bit underwhelming, unfortunately. That rounds us out with Pierre. Pierre is technically in third, but does have actually the third most shares. And the QSR and BZU have decent track available to them, and they both have 2 trains currently. So pretty good revenue potential for him. The JLR is his other presidency, and the JLR also has 2 trains. So as long as this 8 train doesn't come out right away, if he's able to get a couple runs of these 4 trains, maybe able to come back into this game and take it. Louis, he is selling the SCR. Nobody wants to be involved in that company. Buying the BCR. Okay. I think that's just a move recognizing that the SCR will realistically never have any bonus on the stock round, whereas the BCR is running quite far to the right. Mercedes passing, may want to sell some of these SCR shares if she could. I think is that a naked presidency, a 40% presidency? I don't think it is actually. So it's just a 20%. So she could, in theory, optimize her portfolio a little bit. Maybe wants to look towards the BCR. Ed selling a JHA and buys the BCR instead of Mercedes. Pierre is content in passing. Looks like everybody else is passing as well, so a pretty quick stock round. The CKR running his 4+4, pays it out, and buys a 6E. Is actually just shuffling trains and is shuffling against operating order, so loses a run on that 6E as a result. That's not going to be good for her. Going to be losing her lead, it looks like. NJR upgrading Heifei, I may be mispronouncing that, running the 6 train, and unfortunately has to hit some of these dits and doesn't have the most exciting route as a result. Pays for 320 JHA. With a 6 train, I think we will see the potential first Trans-Siberian run of the game here. Blocking anybody from heading south through that double O city, at least for now. Runs for 260, and interestingly, I suppose not going for the Trans-Siberian route, so must have done the math and decided that the revenue was going to be better running south. Pays that out. HKR looking to get into that double O, which I believe will upgrade to join those cities. So the attempt to block this revenue south or run south is not going to be successful. Running for 210 and pays it out. BZU, does this company finally get the Trans-Siberian run? Surely somebody's going to be doing this. That double O city opens up. No tokens available to the BZU to lock down a run down south. Running for 550 and actually also not taking advantage of the east-west run. Mercedes on the SCR running just a 4 train, and looks like they are interested in getting into Shanghai via this double dit, or not double dit, just this single dit. Running for 180 and has to withhold yet again. Boy, it's painful to watch. JLR, 2 runs and getting a run into Shanghai. Not taking advantage of it just yet, paying out for 480. Train marker is at the JGG, so midway through the operations here, and they have no cash to do anything about that. BCR is upgrading the double O down south, running 2 trains for 480, pays it out. QSR upgrading Dalian, running for 550, which they pay. JHU running for 540. JGG, nobody's bought any trains, so we will be seeing a stock round here. Is able to bypass Jinan and get a run into Shanghai down south with its 6E, it looks like. Runs for 550, pays out. And the 8 train has been exported. So all the 4 trains are gone, but all the players with 2 trains are happy that they got as many runs out of them as they did. That was a slow operating round. And we are into the end of the game. Just 3 operating rounds separate us. Everybody's at their cert limit, so I don't expect to see a whole lot of shuffling. I think all the good companies have basically sold out already. The JGG does, in theory, have the 4+4 to bank on, but the JGG just operated, so the odds of that 4+4 running seem low. As a result, I don't know that we're going to see much activity here. Not a whole lot of shares left to buy. Pierre passing, Louis passing, Mercedes selling out of the SCR. Probably should have done that last time. A little bit too late for them. Buying the JGG. Ed selling an HKR, and we'll buy JGG as well. So these players are recognizing the potential for that 4+4. Buying the JGG, and we are into the next and final set of operating rounds. Let's just pause for a second here and look at the players. So Pierre is in first place, but narrowly. 2 players are trailing him by between $100 and $200. Louis is in last place. So Pierre looking pretty strong. May be able to take this game, but it is really quite close. And looking at the share density, Ed is 2 shares ahead of him, so maybe he's able to catch. I think we can move rather quickly through these operating sets. Why don't we go through the operating set here, just see what happens with the 8E train, and then we can kind of start skipping ahead. CKR down south. Do they have a permit? They do have a D permit. That must be from, oh, they just assigned it. Okay. So it's going to be able to start laying track again and is upgrading that double load into gray, running for 650. NJR running a 6 train into Beijing, it looks like, for 380, pays it out. I don't think a 380 revenue is going to be enough to change the game state, really. JHA, no permit for them, so running for 270, 320, I should say, pays it out. HKR, running for 280. BZU, looks like nobody's taken advantage of the Trans-Siberian route. Just going to be everybody's running through Beijing. Running for 370. SCR trainless. Looks like they're going to be forced to buy the 8E. That's pretty painful. Does link up with Lhasa and does buy the 8E. So that will be the train marker. Actually, sorry, the train marker doesn't matter anymore. I think the train marker is back at JGG. So we'll only have 2 runs of that 8E train. I think that's a death sentence for them. JLR 6E train, upgrading Beijing into gray, running for 320 and paying it out. We'll complete this operating round to the JGG and then start skipping ahead. BCR running a 6 train, no track for him for just 380 as a result of the stock market bonus, pays it out. QSR, no track and running through Beijing for 460. JHU, able to upgrade Tianjin, so a little bit more cash for him. Looks like he's currently running the ferry, actually running 2 ferries, so a little bit inefficient there. Running for 340 and pays it out. JGG, last company, actually first company to operate of the second to last operating round. So we'll just see what they run for. Looks like 320, 370, they pay it out. And I think we can start skipping here. Let's look at the spreadsheet. So Pierre is in first by a very narrow margin. Ed is closely trailing him. And Ed is actually running for a little bit more in the last operating round. He is the JGG player, so he's the player that gets that extra little bonus from where the game end trigger was started. So this may be a misleading revenue compared to Pierre. But it's very close between those 2 players. Probably too close for me to really predict. I don't think there's a whole lot of interesting stuff left going on in this game. If we look at tokens, JHA has a token, doesn't have cash for it, and JLR, same story. So I don't think we'll be seeing any tokens. The track development is very limited now that not many companies have D permits, and there shouldn't really be any new train purchases. So let's skip this operating round. And let's look here. Looks like it is still extremely close between Pierre and Ed, but Pierre is still technically ahead, and his revenue is only $9 less than Ed's. So his advantage is high enough that he should be able to take this game. So I'm expecting Pierre to very narrowly win this game. Looks like he does by a margin of 192, so a little bit of an advantage that it was gained over the last operating round, it looks like, but no surprises there. Pierre is narrowly winning. Mercedes comes in third, and Louis is bringing up the rear. Well played to all these players. There was one play by Mercedes that I liked where she was clearly showing that she's aware of the operating order of the players and their likelihood of operating before the next stock round. I thought that was really nice, and she ended up with an extra bump in priority as a result of the other players catching that a little bit later than she did. Pierre was the QSR and the BZU player, so just really was able to take advantage of good track throughout the game, synergistic track, and was able to secure runs through Beijing as well for himself, so just consistent play throughout the game. Ed was on the NJR and the Hacker. I do wonder if you just reverse the float order of those 2 companies, if you float the Shanghai company first, does he win this game if everything else is the same? Hard to say, but that Shanghai run is just a little bit more lucrative than running out of Nanjing. So possibilities there. And then Louis was the BCR player and just kind of fell behind early. I'm not entirely sure where he went wrong. I think he's been behind long enough that I've kind of forgotten the mistakes that got him to where he was. But yeah, just not a real strong performance from the BCR on this match. Thanks for watching. I think we kept this game a little bit shorter than the average 1880 game that we've commentated in the past. So I hope it was enjoyable and will be watched. Wishing everybody a happy 4th of July, and Track Talk will be back in the future.